I never pictured my Thursday morning starting with me boxing up my life at Whitmore Digital. The sky over downtown Seattle was that familiar slate gray, the kind that seeps into your bones, matching the weight in my chest. I stood in my office, a glass corner suite I had earned through years of late nights, missed family gatherings, and bruising boardroom negotiations. I used to walk into this room with a sense of pride. Today it felt like someone else's territory. The furniture gleamed untouched, and the air felt sterile, like all warmth had been vacuumed out the moment I handed over the keycard. "You've got 30 minutes, Avery," came a cold voice from the door. I turned to see Brian Whitmore, his umbrella dripping onto the polished hardwood floors, dark circles under his eyes, barely concealed by the smug curve of his lips. His tailored trench coat looked freshly steamed, a sharp contrast to the storm outside. "Brittany will be stepping in as Vice President of Strategy effective immediately," he added, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "Brittany Lane, my cousin. The same Brittany who couldn't commit to a job longer than a season, who flitted from jewelry making to kombucha startups like she was collecting hobbies. She'd waltzed in last month with a title and a view, all thanks to cozy connections with Brian's wife Samantha." I swallowed the bitterness as I placed my Team Leader of the Year award into the cardboard box. Then went the crystal plaque from our $20 million growth round the framed article from Forbes Tech Weekly featuring my division. Each item I packed felt like I was erasing proof that I had ever mattered here. "And your badge," Brian added with a raised eyebrow, his voice clipped. "Security's tightening up. Policy." Without a word, I handed it over my lips, twitching in a smile I didn't feel. What he didn't realize, what none of them at Whitmore Digital knew, was that I was the name behind Morgan Foundry, the silent entity that actually owned this skyscraper. I had taken the name from my grandmother, the woman who taught me everything I knew about power patience and planning. "Of course," I replied smoothly, "although someone might want to recheck the lease clause we reviewed last quarter. The Foundry sent over an updated memo yesterday." He waved it off. "Brittany can handle that sort of thing. She's far more personable than you ever were, Avery." He said it like it was a compliment. If only he understood that clause had nothing to do with rent. It was a quiet trigger buried deep in the contract, an immediate termination clause tied to fair hiring practices. A legal landmine designed for moments exactly like this. I placed the final item into the box, a photo of me and my grandmother, Margaret Morgan, taken when I was 14, both of us standing in front of this very building before it had become Whitmore's headquarters. Her voice echoed in my memory, soft but certain. "Someday they'll realize real power doesn't live in the title above your door. It's in the deed under your feet." By 17, I could recite zoning law better than my civics homework. By 21, I founded Morgan Foundry using the inheritance Grandma left me. And at 24, I bought this property outright, then offered Whitmore Digital a sweetheart lease rate. Not because I needed the money, but because I knew this day would eventually arrive. As I lifted the box into my arms, Brian wasn't done. One last thing he said. "About that severance package, the board decided to roll it into Brittany's onboarding bonus. You know how these things go." He gave me that tilt of the head reserved for condescending uncles at family reunions. Family first, right? That phrase again, family first. I'd heard it my whole life. When Brittany maxed out her credit cards my parents pulled from my college fund to bail her out. When she rear-ended her BMW and needed a new car by Monday, I was told to be grateful my bus route had decent service. And when she decided she wanted my title, my parents made that familiar call, soft voices, guilt-laced words telling me not to make things harder. Of course, I murmured, brushing past him. Family first. The elevator descended in slow, mechanical silence, its polished brass walls reflecting a fractured version of my expression, composed almost serene. Yet beneath the still surface, my mind raced like floodwaters against a dam. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Jordan Blake, my attorney, and one of the few people I truly trusted, would have received the go-ahead. Everything was ready. The carefully crafted legal trap years in the making was now set to spring. By the time the sun rose over downtown Seattle, a courier would be placing a manila envelope stamped with authority and finality onto the legal desk at Whitmore Digital. Inside it, a formal eviction notice, grounded in an obscure but unambiguous clause of the lease, breach of ethical conduct, wrongful dismissal, favoritism in hiring, whisper campaigns, gaslighting, and a workplace made hostile by familial politics, and every claim within it documented, substantiated. I had the receipts, dozens of them buried in email archives, backed up onto drives, and neatly cataloged like weapons in a war I never wanted but had long prepared for. The elevator gave a soft ding, and as the doors slid open into the grand marble lobby, I was met with the scene I had been bracing for Brittany Lane in a perfectly fitted blush-toned blazer that looked more curated than earned, stood in hushed conversation with Samantha Whitmore, her patron saint and architect of this familial betrayal. Brittany's smirk twisted when she saw me. "Well," Samantha drawled, her lips pursed in a performance of politeness, "glad you're clearing out. Brittany's excited to give the floor a makeover. Your aesthetic was sterile." Brittany chuckled, fake humility oozing through her voice. "It's nothing personal, Avery. I'll take care of everything, I promise." I stepped back as she moved toward me, hand extended like we were co-stars in some drama she thought she was directing. "Just like you took care of the narrative," I asked, my voice, so even it startled me. The edges of my anger had cooled to something sharper, colder. Samantha rolled her eyes with theatrical exasperation. "Don't be dramatic. It's just business." Ah, that phrase again. Just business. As if gaslighting your own blood, orchestrating character assassinations and reshaping entire career paths based on proximity to a dinner table somehow fell into the same category as quarterly reports. "Yes," I said softly, "it is." Outside, the storm clouds had lifted, but the air still hung heavy with tension, thick and damp like the breath before a clap of thunder. I walked to my car, a modest silver sedan, a little scuffed at the bumper, a little out of style, but mine. I loaded the box gently into the back seat and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. There were no signs of defeat in the eyes staring back at me. No cracks, no hesitation, only clarity. My phone buzzed once, a message from Jordan. "All documents signed." I replied with one word, "proceed." The streets of West Haven were unusually still as I drove home. The city, unaware of the reckoning that was brewing, moved around me with its usual indifference, buses, groaning coffee carts, steaming joggers splashing through puddles. But in my mind, the images played in vivid detail, Brian's confusion hardening into panic when he saw the legal seal, Samantha's disbelief souring into rage, and Brittany's shock when she realized her designer office would never be hers to keep. But most of all, I heard Grandma Margaret's voice again, as clear as if she were sitting beside me. "Real power, Avery, doesn't come from who walks the halls with the biggest title. It comes from knowing those halls stand on your ground." I pulled into my driveway, a quiet bungalow hidden behind a curtain of lilacs and climbing ivy. Nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed wealth or conquest. Just a home. A patch of earth with my name on the mailbox and peace behind the front door. Another message chimed on my phone, from Brittany. "No hard feelings, right? You get it, it's just business. See you at family brunch Sunday." I didn't answer. There would be time for apologies and avocado toast later. Right now I had work to do. Inside, the real war room waited. My home office wasn't clad in brushed steel or fitted with glass partitions, but it housed something far more potent: truth. On the shelves, the deed to the building, the founding charter of Morgan Foundry binders, marked by year and color-coded tabs, each one filled with emails, meeting transcripts, HR reports buried by legal, and notes from conversations they thought I didn't hear. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved with purpose. First, a scheduled email to all Whitmore Digital staff. "Please be advised that due to unforeseen operational changes, all employees are to work remotely effective immediately. Building access will be suspended as of 900 a.m. Next, the press release. Neutral in tone but devastating in implication. Morgan Foundry terminates lease with Whitmore Digital due to documented ethical and contractual violations. Finally, instructions to security. Change all access codes. Lockdown scheduled for 9 hours sharp." My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Brittany explained everything. "We're disappointed in the way you handled this. Why couldn't you just support your cousin?" I stared at the message, so brief, so blind. A chorus I'd heard since I was 10 years old. I placed the phone screen down as if that could silence what they never wanted to see. Tomorrow they would understand, every last one of them, that what they had built was a castle of glass, glinting and arrogant, perched atop land they never really owned. And I had simply waited for the wind. The rain had returned to Seattle, tapping its steady rhythm against my window, like the prelude to a symphony I had composed in silence. It was no longer just weather, it was atmosphere punctuation. to a final act I had choreographed with meticulous patience. Every detail had been laid out, every contingency accounted for. In less than 24 hours, Whitmore Digital would awaken, not to their grand rebranding under Brittany Lane's vision, but to an abrupt end, authored by the woman they thought they could erase. They thought I was the quiet one. The girl who stayed late, avoided conflict, nodded in meetings, and kept her desk immaculate. What they didn't see, what they never cared to notice, was that while they were playing checkers, I had been studying the chessboard piece by piece, silently advancing with every perceived retreat. When they fired me, they didn't cut a tether, they triggered a mechanism. They didn't exile an employee. They awakened a landlord with blueprints and battle maps. And Brittany, poor naive Brittany, she would learn that some games are over before you even touch the first pawn. I closed my laptop with a soft click, the motion final and certain, and moved to stand by the window. The rain streaked down the glass in elegant rivulets, tracing paths like decisions cascading toward consequence. Somewhere in the city, the dawn would be breaking behind a curtain of clouds. But I wasn't watching for sunlight. I was watching for signs of movement gears, turning defenses falling. Stormy with 100% chance of consequences, I mused, a slight smile curling at the corner of my lips. At exactly 8:30 a.m., I eased into a parking space across from the towering structure of Whitmore Digital's downtown campus. My coffee still warm, steamed in the cup holder beside me, its scent mingling with anticipation. From my vantage point, I could see the entrances, the lobby's glinting facade, and the employees arriving, laughing, chatting, clutching lattes and phones, oblivious to the unraveling storm looming just minutes ahead. At 8:45 a.m., the familiar sleek silhouette of Brian Whitmore's black Audi glided to a stop near the executive entrance. Moments later, Brittany's rose gold Tesla slid in behind it, its fresh shine too eager, too proud. Of course they arrived together. It was meant to be her coronation. At exactly 900 a.m., my phone came alive. Notifications lit the screen. Access codes changed. Entrances sealed. Video confirmation from Jordan. Eviction notice delivered. From my car, I watched the dominoes fall. First, a receptionist blinking in confusion, then security repositioning at the doors, followed by clusters of employees halted mid-step, their keycards flashing red instead of green. Phones rose into the air like confused periscopes. Murmurs thickened into pockets of unrest. And then the crescendo. Brian exploded through the lobby, the eviction notice crumpled in his fist like a weapon that failed to fire. His face, usually composed with executive detachment, now flushed with disbelief and fury. He barked into his phone, pacing, shouting commands that held no weight anymore. My phone vibrated, Brian calling, straight to voicemail. Again, this time Brittany. I watched her through the windshield. Her heels were too high for the wet pavement, her walk too rehearsed. She paced with quick, jerky movements, the calm facade cracking beneath the pressure of uncertainty. She called again. Voicemail. Samantha next ignored. Then came the message, short and panicked. What did you do? I stepped out of the car with unhurried precision, smoothing the lapels of my jacket. My boots clicked against the slick pavement as I crossed the street, each step slicing through the tension. Heads turned, whispers followed. Phones captured the moment, though I didn't care. This was the reckoning. This was clarity. Brian spotted me. Recognition flickered, then flared into rage. You, he spat, raising the document like an accusation. Morgan Foundry. It's you. I gave a cordial smile, my tone measured, calm, firm. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. I trust you've received the lease termination notice. This is outrageous, he growled, voice rising. You can't just kick us out. We have rights. Actually, I said, producing a well-worn leather folder from my bag and flipping to a page already tabbed in red, I can. Clause 9. Subsection B. Breach of ethical corporate governance, including but not limited to nepotism. Wrongful termination and internal defamation is immediate grounds for lease cancellation. I looked up, letting the silence do the rest. Would you care to review the documentation from my dismissal? It's quite comprehensive. Brittany stepped forward, now her expression shifting from confusion to desperation. This is revenge, she said, voice shrill. You're bitter. I got your job. You took my title. I corrected her, my voice like ice across velvet. By colluding with Samantha to fabricate claims by manipulating my parents and by convincing them I needed to step aside. You pocketed my severance and smeared my name. I gestured behind them to the locked doors and the building that no longer welcomed them. And now I said you have nothing, no office, no role, no address, just echoes. Samantha pushed forward, her practiced poise unraveling like thread. Brian, she hissed, say something, she can't do this. But Brian wasn't listening. His fingers were flying across his screen, calling his legal team his board. I watched his face closely, saw the color drain from it with each passing second. The eviction was airtight, the clause enforceable. The foundation he stood on wasn't his. It was mine. You have 24 hours to vacate, I announced to the gathering crowd, my voice carrying over the drizzle. Anything left behind will be treated as abandoned property. You can't expect us to move an entire company in one day, Brian cried. We have contracts, clients. The same amount of time you gave me to clear my office, I replied smoothly. Nothing personal, remember? Just business. Brittany reached for my arm. You can't do this to me. I'm your family. I met her gaze evenly, then gently removed her hand. Exactly. And you always said family first. So that's what I'm doing. I'm protecting my real family. Morgan Foundry. Phones were raised now, people recording. Let them. Oh, and one more thing I said, pulling another document from my folder. This is a formal notice of legal action, defamation, workplace discrimination, wrongful termination. It's all here. Brian stepped toward me, his face twisted in fury. You'll regret this, he snarled. I'll bury you in litigation. I look forward to it, I said softly. Discovery should be enlightening. He blinked, and I knew the weight of my words had landed. I had it all, emails, recordings, contracts funneled through friends, complaints quietly buried by Samantha favoritism dressed in faux merit. I had built a digital fortress. He understood the threat the moment I spoke, not just from my calm confidence or the fine print highlighted in the folder I carried, but from what I didn't need to say aloud. The vendor kickbacks funneled through shell consultancies, the advisory payments routed to his golf buddy's dummy firm, the anonymous complaints that mysteriously disappeared from HR's inboxes. The mosaic of misdeeds formed a damning picture of corruption and exclusion, all compiled with clinical precision. Everything was cataloged. Everything was ready to be unsealed. I glanced at my watch, the second hand ticking forward with a rhythm I had grown to trust. You've got 23 hours and 45 minutes left, I said evenly. I'd start packing. I turned on my heel, the pavement slick beneath me, the air taut with the weight of exposed truth. Behind me, Brittany Lane's voice broke the silence, thin and tremulous. What about Sunday brunch, she called after me. Mom and Dad already made the reservation. I paused for a beat, then half-turned my expression, unreadable. Tell them I won't make it, I said, my voice like velvet over steel. I'll be busy meeting with a tenant who doesn't treat loyalty like a liability. What followed was orchestrated chaos, the kind of upheaval that disrupts the rhythm of an entire street. Box trucks lined up outside the building, engines idling as staff poured from the doors carrying monitors, desk chairs, and boxes of personal effects. Executives whispered furiously into phones. Managers paced with wild eyes. And I watched it all detached, observant from the window of Jordan Blake's law office, which faced the Whitmore building like a stage director surveying a crumbling set. We were already fielding leasing proposals. Interest was high. By midnight, most of Whitmore Digital's floors had been emptied. I returned alone to what had once been my office, now stripped of presence, but not of memory. Brittany hadn't even bothered to remove the framed vision board I'd created, nor the monthly quote that had hung beside my window. Vision is not the art of seeing what is, but what could be. I stood at the glass, watching Seattle shimmer under the sodium glow of streetlights, the skyline no longer a symbol of conquest, but of endurance. My phone lit up again and again, one message after another. From my mother, "How could you do this to your cousin?" From my father, "This isn't who we raised you to be." From Brittany, "You've destroyed everything." But then, amid the flood of shame and guilt and disbelief, came a quiet ping from a number I hadn't seen in years. It was my grandmother. The message was brief, but it cut through the noise like sunlight through fog. He would be so proud. You're the only one who truly understood what real power looks like. The next morning, the media storm broke. Headlines blazed across screens and front pages. Whitmore Digital evicted in sudden legal shakeup. Corporate power play sparks family feud. And my personal favorite, Morgan Foundry, emerges as silent titan behind Seattle property surge. The article was clinical in its praise commendations on strategic acquisitions, long-term growth planning, and the visionary behind it all. The Whitmore building, it stated, was merely one piece of a far larger portfolio. A week later, I received an invitation, not from my parents, but from the one voice that had always cut through the noise, Margaret Morgan. Dinner, her house, no pretense. When I arrived, she was already seated in her usual high-backed chair, wrapped in a shawl that smelled faintly of lavender and ink. Her eyes held the same spark I remembered from childhood, the spark that had once turned a dilapidated storefront into the seed of an empire. "Your grandfather kept a journal," she said softly, placing a weathered leather notebook into my hands. "He wrote about you often." My throat tightened as I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable neat, looping a touch of elegance even in its brevity. My granddaughter asked me today why I invest in buildings people have forgotten. I told her what my father told me. Real value isn't what stands above the ground, it's who owns the ground itself. She understood. That girl will go far. I blinked against the sting in my eyes. The weight of the moment wrapped itself around me, not just the memory of my grandfather, but the realization that everything I had built, all the silence I had endured, had not gone unnoticed. "She called yesterday," my grandmother said, pouring tea into 2 worn porcelain cups. "Brittany. Said she's moving. Can't seem to find work here anymore." I said nothing, but a slow nod betrayed the thought I had been turning over all day, the email I'd received that morning from a rising tech incubator eager to lease the building. Their vision, a collaborative space for young, underfunded founders' mentorship, shared resources, innovation over ego. Exactly the kind of future I could believe in. "Revenge," my grandmother murmured, "is a poor man's game. Success, real success, is rising so high that you can offer a hand to others." I smiled gently, turning my cup in my hands. "It was never about revenge," I said. "It was about justice. And now, it's about legacy." That night, as I drove home under a soft, cloudy sky, I passed by the now nameless building that had once borne the Whitmore crest. The logo had been removed. The glass gleamed blankly clean, waiting. My phone buzzed again. A new message. "Brittany. I get it now. What you built. What it took. I'm sorry I tried to take it from you. I never saw how hard you worked. I didn't know." I didn't reply. Not yet. Some truths demand silence. Some apologies require action. As I pulled into my driveway, the soft crunch of gravel beneath my tires, the only sound, I stepped out and breathed in the stillness of home. The scent of rain still lingered, mingling with the faint perfume of my garden roses. And again I heard my grandfather's words, not in memory now, but in truth. Real power isn't the biggest office. It's owning the ground beneath it. And now at last they understood. If you've made it to the end, thank you. This story was never just about corporate leases, office politics, or legal chess moves. It was about value, how it's measured, how it's recognized, and how easily it's dismissed by those too close to see it clearly. It's about worth, how often it's hidden in silence, and how quietly it endures. I never set out to destroy, I simply refused to be destroyed. Have you ever had to walk away from someone or something just to protect your peace? Have you ever been dismissed or underestimated only to rise quietly, steadily, unmistakably? Share your story in the comments below. Let's remind each other we're not alone. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel seen, heard, or just a little more powerful in your stillness, go ahead and tap that like button. It's a small act, but it tells me these stories matter. And if you'd like to hear more, subscribe. There's so much more to come. Because sometimes the strongest stories are the ones built in silence until they're ready to echo.